Good morning. We are going to talk about economics today. So, all of you are economics students? Correct. All right. As Rodrigo mentioned, I am Phil Magness. I am a research fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, all the way up in Massachusetts, United States. It's very cold up there right now. So, this is actually warm compared to us right now, even though the weather came through. But I want to start with a history lesson. And I want to ask you, who knows who this is? Take a guess, or shout it out if you know. Who is this? Socrates? Did I hear a couple of Socrates? And when did he live? A long time ago. 2,500 years ago, give or take. So very old. But we still remember him today. Why? Who was he? He's a philosopher. And he lived in ancient Athens, Greece. And he is one of the first founders of the philosophy tradition. And he was famous in Greece. In his own time, he was so famous that he annoyed all of his fellow citizens. And what do you think they did to him? They killed him. They accused him of corrupting the youth, the students, by teaching them bad ideas that caused them to question their elders. So they put him on trial, and all the citizens of Athens voted, and they voted to execute him. Democracy. So Socrates was well known in his own time, but he had several famous students that came to honor him and thought of his legacy, and that's why we still know him today. But he had a very famous observation that actually came from this location. This is the ruins of the temple of the oracle at Delphi. And she was the main figure in the ancient Greek religion where you went to get wisdom. And one of Socrates' friends went to the oracle at Delphi and asked her, there's a picture of what she may have looked like. Asked the oracle at Delphi, who is the wisest person in all of Greece? And what did she say? Socrates. Socrates, the guy they were trying to kill. Why would they kill the wisest person in all of Greece? Then he asked the oracle, why is he the wisest person in all of Greece? And she says, because he realizes, unlike anybody else, that he knows nothing. He realizes that he knows nothing. So he's the wisest because he realizes his own lack of wisdom. And that puts him ahead of anyone else in the whole Greek world because they all think they know everything. They think they know everything about how to plan your life, how to govern, how to arrange things. And when we think about economics, economics is the science of exchange. The science of exchange. Keep that in mind. We'll bring this all together. So Socrates has a famous quote. He says, as for me, all I know is that I know nothing. And because of that, I'm smarter than all of you. And if you realize that you know nothing too, you are wise. You are truly wise. He says that the lack of knowledge is the human condition. This is pervasive. Everyone around us experiences the lack of knowledge. And we'll demonstrate this using economics to you. But first I want to ask you, of all the people I show you, who realizes that they too know nothing? Who is as wise as Socrates? Is he as wise as Socrates? Does he think he knows nothing? Does he know nothing? Yes. Okay. But this is not a partisan thing. Does she think she knows nothing? No. But does she know nothing? Probably. And in fact, they're really kind of the same person as her. But this is true of all political leaders, and I'll show you some in the United States, but it's true of every country. Political leaders, people that go into politics, think they know everything. They all have a plan. They all have a solution that they're trying to offer you to tell you how to live. Did he think he knew everything? Yeah, what about See? Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The United States. We'll go to another country. Who is that? That's Napoleon. Did he think he knew nothing? No, he tried to conquer the world. Tried to conquer the world. Why? Because he wanted to govern and rule the world. Another one. This may be more familiar. Who is that? That's Santana, the Napoleon of the West. What did he think he would do? Conquer the West. Conquer the Americas. Who is that? King Henry VIII of England. And what did he think he should do? Rule England, but he thought he knew so much that he knew more than the Pope because he wanted a divorce. So he founded his own church. Who's that? Genghis Khan. What did he try to do? Conquer the world, rule the world because he thought he knew everything. Go back to ancient times. Who is that? That is Augustus Caesar. Conquered the world again, thought that he knew everything. So all of these great leaders of history, and maybe not so great leaders of history, think that they know everything. And they think they try to rule. They think they try to govern. They are ignoring Socrates' advice from 2,500 years ago. So it still has not set in that we know nothing. I want to tell you a story, and we'll give you a copy of this at the end. So this is this book called I Pencil. And I want to ask you, all of you have a pencil. You use a pencil, right? Could you make a pencil from scratch? No. And I want to ask you to tell me how to make a pencil anyway. If I were to give you a homework assignment and say, go home and make a pencil from scratch, what would you do? Where would you start? What's your first ingredient? A tree. So you have to cut down a tree. And you can't use any tools. You have to make your own tools. Uh-oh. Who knows how to cut down a tree with a rock? That's a lot harder than if you had an axe or a saw. So you have to cut down a tree, and it has to be a special type of tree, because not every tree works for pencils. Cedar. Cedar is really good for pencils. So you cut down a tree, and let's say you carve it into a little shape like that, a stick. What do you have to do next? Add graphite. Where do you get graphite? What is graphite? Who knows what graphite is? It's a type of carbon. And it comes from the ground, but it's only a certain type of carbon. You have to mine it. And let's say you have a stick and you have graphite. How do you get the graphite in the stick? You have to cut it open, lay it inside, and glue it back together. Where do you get the glue? You have to make that. Are we done? No, what else do you need? The eraser. Where do you get the rubber for the eraser? From a tree, a rubber tree. Do rubber trees grow around here? No. Do rubber trees grow anywhere hundreds of miles from here? Probably not. You have to go to the part of the world where the rubber trees grow. And historically, that used to be Africa. Now they have them planted elsewhere, but you get the picture. You have to go to a long distance to get the rubber tree. And then you have to assemble it. One more ingredient we need, the paint. If you want to make a yellow pencil, you need to paint it yellow. Where do you get paint? You have to make it. So this is a really hard set of tasks that none of you could do yourself without significant effort, hard effort. How much does a pencil cost, though? Cents, pennies, pesos. Very cheap, very cheap. You can get one for free at almost any business. You can walk into a hotel, they'll give you a pencil. You can walk into a car dealership, they'll give you a pencil. They advertise on them. They give them away. And if not, you can go to the store and get them for very, very cheap. So you may ask yourself this question, and this is what Leonard Read, the author of this essay, does. We have this very common item that's very cheap, but it's immensely complex to make. How is that done? by any one person? And his answer is, it isn't. It's done by hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that never know each other, never meet each other, but they somehow come together and make all the ingredients of a pencil. Leonard Read talked about pencils. Other people have tried the same experiment with other items. Let's talk about toasters. Who used a toaster for breakfast today? What did you cook in a toaster? A sandwich. Toast. Easy, right? How much does a toaster cost? There's a toaster. That one is at Walmart. Is it expensive? Cheap? Cheap? Want to guess? Guess a price. How much would you pay for that toaster? 20. Okay. It's ballpark. That's a good range. And the actual price of that one was $9.91 in the United States. It's probably around the same at any Walmart in the world. What are all the components look like? Remember the pencil had like 4 or 5 ingredients. Here are all the ingredients of the toaster. All the different parts. There's a toaster that's been taken apart. You have wire. You have a spring. You have the metal that actually toasts the toast. Much more complex, but still very cheap. Can you make a toaster from scratch? This man attempted to. And he wrote a book about it called The Toaster Project. That's his toaster. He succeeded. There's an even better picture of the toaster. Those of you that ate toast out of a toaster or a sandwich this morning, would you eat anything out of that? No. Sometimes there's one person that raises their hand and says, I would try that. But most people say no. It gives you tetanus. That's an ugly toaster. But it was made from scratch. He built all the ingredients himself. He mined the metal. He made the plastic. Here's another picture of it. Inside. This is iron he got out of the ground. Plastic he made from oil. And did it work? One time. Then it caught on fire. It exploded. It burnt his toast. So it did not make very good toast. How much money do you think he spent on this project? Thousands, I'm hearing. Thousands? Who thinks it's thousands? So he wrote his book. That's how much money. Would you rather have the toaster from Walmart or that? Walmart. $9.91. See the difference? This works in other things. Food. Andy George wanted a sandwich, and he tried the same thing. He wanted to cook a sandwich, and he made a sandwich out of chicken. Does that look like a good sandwich? Would you eat that? Yeah, I'd eat that too. It's a pretty good sandwich. He made that from scratch. And he said, how much would it take to make it from scratch? There's him eating his sandwich. Well, he grew the grain from the ground. He already broke his rule because the rake is not homemade. It's from the store. But he tried. He tried. He wanted honey mustard on his sandwich. So he went to the beekeeper and he got the honey. Then he got the chicken. I'm not going to show what happened to the chicken, but that is the chicken. How much did it cost? $1,500 US. How much does a sandwich cost if you go across the street to any restaurant? Dollars, pesos. Cheap. It's inexpensive. You may have that in your pocket. You could not afford his sandwich, including 6 months of labor on top of that to grow the chicken and grow the grains that made the bun. So why are we talking about sandwiches and pencils and toasters? Well, this is a demonstration of the power of economic coordination in its economic coordination without any plan. No one says this is the way you must make a toaster. No one says these are all the parts of the toaster that have to go to this one place at the same time, or pencil, or sandwich. In fact, it's coordinated without any coordinator at all. This shows us an illustration of ways to plan an economy or not to plan an economy. On one end, we refer to as markets. That is, we allow individual choices to operate without any direction from above. The other end we refer to as central planning, and that is a government official or an administrator makes all the decisions. Government officials, including all the ones that I showed you on that list that think they know everything, they like central planning. Entrepreneurs, people that work in markets, don't need a central plan. But we have history that also tells us. Here's how a central plan worked in the Soviet Union. This is 1917 to 1991, the government of Russia. Here's how they distributed milk. And what do you notice about that? Waiting in line. We're going to see a lot of waiting in line. That's the grocery store in Moscow. That's the liquor store in Moscow. There's the bread store in Moscow. The meat store. But there's Safeway, a modern market, a modern grocery store. And I used this picture because that's when Nikita Khrushchev, the head of the Soviet Union, came to the United States to speak at the UN in 1959. And they took him to a grocery store. And what do you think he said in response? This is fake. This is staged. These are actors. No one could possibly bring all of this stuff together because he knew lines from Moscow. And that was all he knew. And he was trying to centrally plan, trying to coordinate. But he thought this was all fake. Was it fake? No. You may have gone to the grocery store yesterday. Go to the market yesterday. And there's all sorts of abundance there, none of it planned. Fast forward 50 years. Boris Yeltsin, he's the first president after the Soviet Union. And this was right before the Soviet Union fell apart. He too came to North America and did a tour. And he went to the grocery store. And what do you think his response was? It's true. You can have everything in abundance. Even to the point that today, that's North Korea. They have a fake grocery store that they show the tourists to. Not a good place to be a tourist. If you go to North Korea, they take you to a fake grocery store, and it sells footballs and backpacks. But no one in North Korea can actually go to the store. You're not allowed. I want to ask you something. Look at your shoes. What do your shoes look like? Look at your neighbor's shoes. I know it's kind of weird. That's the end of it. Do any of you have the same shoe as your neighbor? No. Why not? Who would allow your neighbor to pick your shoe for you? One person. Who would be afraid of letting your neighbor pick your shoe for you? Yes, you would. You would not trust them, right? No. Sorry, neighbor. You do not trust someone to pick your shoes. Why? What kind of shoes do you have? What color are they? Different, right? Well, if you lived in the Soviet Union, where there was a central plan to decide the number of shoes and the type of shoes that people wanted, here are your choices after you wait in line. Not the United States at the same time. Not any other country in the world at the same time where you had actual shoe stores, but you waited in line. Choice 1. Anyone want these? No buyers? Okay, we'll give you choice number 2. Choice number 2. Any takers? Choice number 2? No? Well, we have the sports model. Choice number 3. No takers? And then the army model. The boot. 4 styles of shoes. That's all you have to choose from. Anyone find shoes that they want? No. I see everyone saying no. Why not? They're all ugly. Do you think they had enough shoes? Well, you're wrong on that. They actually had too many shoes. There's how many shoes they made per year. So that's total number of people, total number of shoes. Everyone could have not only 1 set of shoes, but 3 pairs. You could get the boot, the sports shoe, and the clog and be happy. Were you happy? No. What they found, whenever there was a line at the shoe store, it was not for any of those shoes. They were shoes smuggled in from Italy, across the border. So they wanted the stylish shoes in the Soviet Union. Well, what's the problem here? We have a central plan that made more than enough shoes for everybody, but they were not shoes that anyone wanted. Why not? Well, when I ask you to look at your neighbor's shoes and your own shoes, we discover an economic principle. And that principle is called subjective value. What does that mean? It's that only I know what kind of shoes I want. I could maybe tell my neighbor, who would wear these shoes? They're a little weird, but they exist. People buy these. People buy these. They have the toes, and it may not be your shoe. Who would like sandals? Who would buy sandals? Okay. What about fancy dress shoes for a party or for a dinner? What about hiking boots? Shoes for sports. You all have your different tastes. When you have a central plan, you cannot fulfill that. When you have a market mechanism, you get choice. Illustrate it further. We're in a contest of decisions by authority versus decisions by consumers. And that's the fundamentals of the market, is the decision by the consumer. So decision by authority, what is this? Does anyone recognize that picture? What is it? It's the Berlin Wall. And why did they build the Berlin Wall? To separate, to enforce authority. Because people didn't want to live behind the Berlin Wall. They wanted to live elsewhere. They didn't have a choice, though. So when you have authority making the decision, you take away choice. When you have choice making the decision, you challenge authority. There's another type of authority. We saw that one the other day. I was told that I found the picture that the wall blew over. It's kind of funny. Authority always does succumb to the forces of nature. But is there an alternative? And this is the question I want to ask you. If authority is not good for making choices, and yet we know choices are made and we know goods are made cheaply, what can we do to get around this issue? Well, here's an economist. This is Frederick Hayek, F.A. Hayek, won the Nobel Prize. And one of the things he won the Nobel Prize for was this observation. The task of economics is to demonstrate to men and women how little they know about what they imagine they can design. Who does that sound a lot like? Socrates. 2,500 years later, an economist makes the same observation and wins the Nobel Prize for it. We have not moved too far in 2,500 years. But this is an important principle. It's a tested principle. And what Hayek said is, like Socrates, we must recognize that ignorance is our defining condition as human beings. There's a painting of Socrates again. But it's not really a problem that it's a defining condition. It's not a problem that we're ignorant. In fact, we take what we do know about ourselves and our own preferences, and we figure out ways to get by. Why? He says through a concept called spontaneous order. We organize out of chaos. We organize markets out of chaos because we all know what we want, and that allows us to seek out other things that we want and seek out other things that other people want, and we trade and exchange and fulfill them. So Hayek's point is that spontaneous order is a better way to allocate goods than a central plan. Examples. You all probably used spontaneous order today without realizing it. How? You spoke to each other. You used language. Is there a plan for language? Is there a direction for language? No. And in fact, we know this from history. William Shakespeare. Who is William Shakespeare? He's an author. He writes plays. Romeo and Juliet, everyone knows that, and Hamlet, and all these famous plays. That is Shakespeare in English in 1595. And it's from one of his other books, Richard II. It's about a king of England. And I'll read this to you. And I'm going to sound even weirder than I do with a Texas accent by reading Shakespeare. Go Bushy to the Earl of Wiltshire straight, bid him repair us to Ely House. To see this business, tomorrow next, we will for Ireland, and 'tis time, I trow. And we create, in absence of ourself, our Uncle York, Lord Governor of England. For he is just and always loved us well. Come on, our queen, tomorrow we must part. Be merry, for our stay is short. I'll bow. Shakespeare. What did that mean? I'm going to Ireland tomorrow, and we must part, and I bid you farewell. You understand it, basically. Anyone today that reads this can understand the story that's being told, even though we don't speak that way. What happened in between? 400 years, give or take. What happened in between? Language changed. Did anyone order language to change? Did anyone direct it to change? No, it did organically on our own. And I can prove it even further. That's Shakespeare, 1595. 200 years earlier, the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer. One that April with his shore suit, the drought of March hath pursed the root. I have no idea what that means. 200 years difference. That's the language. Now we need a translator. And this is true of every language in the world. You can go to 13th century Spanish. It's different from Spanish today. You can go to 12th century French. It's different from French today. German, different from German today. Chinese, different from Chinese today. There are even different dialects across countries. We use language here that may not be used in Argentina, that may not be used in Canada. All on the same continent. Even though we have massive communication, unparalleled in human history, we still have differences of language. Why? Because we invent terms and they come into use organically, spontaneously, and somehow it works. I'll prove it works. Those were words added to the English dictionary in 2016. Why? People invented them to solve problems. They needed an explanation for butt dial on their cell phones. New word. Mic drop, my favorite. This is This is like California, bruh. They added that to the dictionary. This is 2016. Some of these terms are old-fashioned now. They've fallen out of favor. There's new terms every year, all organically, spontaneously ordered to allow us to communicate. I think a market's the same way. We take specialized knowledge of things that only we know, our own preferences, and our own skills that we only know. So go back to the pencil factory. The person that works in the pencil factory may only know how to carve wood into the shape and size of a pencil, and may only be really, really good at that one task. Maybe there's another person that only knows how to make rubber and is only really, really good at that one task. Then there's somebody that ships the rubber to the pencil factory and the trees to the pencil factory, and they're only really, really good at that one task. They may not know anything else about pencil production. They may not know anything that even goes on in the pencil factory, but it comes together through that specialization of knowledge. Why? Because they recognize in their own ignorance that they can gain knowledge, bringing us back to Socrates, or bringing us back to Hayek. And what is Hayek going to leave us with? He says, this is not a dispute over whether planning is to be done. It's a dispute as to whether planning is to be done centrally by one authority or to be divided among all of us through our own limited but secure knowledge of what we know. That's the great challenge of society. I'll leave you with another example. Who's seen one of these before? Where you have a path that's planned and people take the shortcut. People take the shortcut. They do this in Texas all the time on the roads where I grew up. They have the interstate freeway, and there's the off-ramp that's planned, but people don't like the off-ramp, so they create their own. And they exit the freeway, and there's new ruts, and eventually the government comes along and says, we should add a new exit there, because that's what people are taking by local knowledge. With that, we're going to take a short break. I'm going to give you a chance to do an economic experiment.